The stars had seen many wars, but none like what was coming. In the cold darkness of space, a massive fleet moved through the void. These ships belonged to the Vorthak Empire, the most feared race in the galaxy. For 3,000 years, they had conquered every world they found. No one had ever stopped them. Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his warship, the Bone Crusher. He was not human. He was Vorthak, 8 feet tall with thick armor-like skin that looked like the shell of a giant insect. He had 4 strong arms, each one powerful enough to crush steel. His yellow eyes glowed as he watched the stars pass by. The Vorthak believed in one simple rule: the strong rule the weak. They had built their entire civilization on this idea. Every Vorthak child learned to fight before they learned to read. Every Vorthak soldier lived to conquer new worlds. They called it strength through domination. Hyunwoo looked at the star map floating in front of him. A small yellow star appeared in the center with several planets orbiting around it. The third planet from the star was blue and green. It looked peaceful and quiet. "Sir," said his second-in-command, a younger Vorthak named Woobin, "we are 3 days away from the target system." "What are your orders?" Hyunwoo smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "The same orders we always have. We take the planet. We make the people our slaves. We add another world to our empire." He had done this many times before. The process was always the same. First, they would scan the planet to see how advanced the people were. Then they would send down troops to show their power. Most species surrendered right away when they saw the Vorthak ships. Those who fought back were quickly defeated. The blue-green planet was called Earth by the people who lived there. The Vorthak had been watching it for months. Their spy ships had reported that the humans were not very advanced. They had only just learned to travel in space. Their weapons were simple. Their technology was basic. It would be an easy conquest. Admiral Taemin commanded the entire invasion fleet from his flagship, the Iron Fist. He was the greatest Vorthak general alive. He had conquered more worlds than any other Vorthak in history. 200 ships followed his command. Each ship carried thousands of soldiers. Taemin stood in his command center watching reports from his scouts. The humans had divided themselves into many different countries. They fought wars among themselves. They could not even unite their own planet. This made them perfect targets. "These humans will make good workers," Taemin told his officers. "They are strong enough to work in our mines. They are smart enough to follow orders, but they are weak enough to control easily." The Vorthak had conquered 846 worlds before Earth. They had enslaved hundreds of different species. Some aliens were used for heavy labor. Others were used for their scientific knowledge. The humans would be put to work in the dangerous mines on the edge of Vorthak space. On Earth, Dr. Ji-hai sat in her laboratory staring at her computer screen. She was an astrophysicist, someone who studied the stars and space. For weeks, her instruments had been picking up strange signals from beyond the solar system. The signals were getting stronger every day. At first, she thought the signals might be from a distant star or maybe a comet. But as she studied them more, she realized something terrible. The signals were not natural. They were made by machines, very advanced machines that were moving toward Earth. Ji-hai tried to contact other scientists around the world. Most of them thought she was wrong. Some said her equipment was broken. Others said she was seeing things that were not there. But a few believed her. They had seen the same signals with their own instruments. She called a meeting with government officials in Seoul. She showed them her data. She explained what the signals meant. "Something is coming," she told them. "Something big. Something dangerous." The officials looked at her charts and numbers. They asked many questions. Some seemed worried. Others seemed doubtful. One man in a dark suit shook his head. "Dr. Ji-hai, you are a respected scientist. But this sounds like science fiction. Are you really telling us that aliens are coming to attack Earth?" "I am telling you what my instruments show," Ji-hai replied. "Large objects are moving toward our solar system. They are using technology we do not understand, and they will be here in less than 3 days." The meeting ended with no decisions. The officials said they would think about it. They would study her data. They would talk to other experts. But Ji-hee knew they did not really believe her. She went home that night feeling frustrated and scared. She looked up at the stars through her telescope. Somewhere out there, death was coming to Earth, and humanity was not ready. The next morning, amateur astronomers around the world began to see something new in the sky. At first, it looked like a new star. But as the hours passed, it grew bigger and brighter. By evening, people could see it without telescopes. It was not a star. It was many objects moving together. News reports began to spread across the planet. Scientists appeared on television to explain what they were seeing. Most still did not want to use the word aliens, but they could not deny that something was approaching Earth. Governments around the world called emergency meetings. Military leaders began to prepare for the unknown. But how do you prepare for an enemy you have never seen? How do you fight technology you do not understand? Captain Hyun-woo watched Earth grow larger on his screens. Soon the Vorthak fleet would arrive. Soon another world would bow before the Empire. He had no doubt about the outcome. The humans were just another weak species that would learn to serve their betters. But something felt different this time. The reports from the spy ships mentioned something unusual about humans. They fought each other constantly, but they also showed strange moments of cooperation. They had weak bodies, but they used tools and machines to make themselves stronger. They were afraid of death, but they sometimes died to protect others. Hyun-woo dismissed these thoughts. Every species had their quirks. It did not matter. The Vorthak way was the only way that mattered. Strength through domination. The strong rule the weak. And soon humanity would learn this lesson like all the others. The countdown had begun. In 72 hours, the most powerful empire in the galaxy would meet a small blue planet called Earth. Neither side knew that this meeting would change everything. The Vorthak fleet arrived exactly when their calculations predicted. Hundreds of massive ships appeared in Earth's sky like dark clouds blocking out the sun. People in every city looked up in fear and wonder. The invasion had begun. Admiral Taemin gave his orders from the command ship. Begin standard conquest protocol. Land troops in major population centers. Show overwhelming force. Demand immediate surrender. The Vorthak had used this same plan on 846 other worlds. It always worked. Most species saw the giant ships and powerful weapons and gave up right away. Those who tried to fight were quickly crushed by superior technology and training. Drop ships descended from the main fleet like angry wasps. Each ship carried 50 Vorthak soldiers in full battle armor. Their weapons could melt steel. Their armor could stop any bullet that humans had ever made. They expected this to be over in a few hours. The first dropship landed in Seoul, South Korea. The Vorthak soldiers marched out, expecting to see crowds of terrified humans begging for mercy. Instead, they found empty streets. The city seemed deserted. Captain Hyun-woo led the Seoul invasion force. He activated his translator device and broadcast a message in the human language. People of this city, we are the Vorthak Empire. You will surrender now or face destruction. You have 1 hour to comply. Nothing happened. No one answered. The streets remained empty. Hyun-woo was confused. Other species usually sent leaders to negotiate or crowds of civilians to surrender. But the humans seemed to have vanished. He ordered his troops to search the buildings. That was when the real war began. Corporal Dong-hyun crouched on the roof of an apartment building, watching the alien soldiers through his scope. He was a Korean army sniper, and he had been waiting for this moment. When the first Vorthak soldier walked into his crosshairs, Dong-hyun pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the alien in the head, but it bounced off the helmet without doing any damage. The Vorthak soldier looked around, trying to figure out where the shot came from. Dong-hyun smiled grimly. He had expected that. Human bullets were too weak to penetrate Vorthak armor. But Dong-hyun had other plans. He aimed at a gas tank on the street below. His next shot caused a massive explosion. The blast knocked 3 Vorthak soldiers off their feet. Their armor protected them from the fire, but they were stunned and confused. While the aliens were distracted, human soldiers hidden in the sewers attacked from below. They did not try to fight the Vorthak directly. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics. They would attack quickly, then disappear into the maze of tunnels under the city. Hyun-woo realized that the humans were using guerrilla warfare. This was not something the Vorthak had encountered before. Most species either surrendered or fought open battles, but the humans were fighting like ghosts. In the Amazon rainforest, another Vorthak force was having similar problems. The jungle was thick and dark. The aliens' heavy armor made it hard for them to move through the dense vegetation. Their thermal vision could not see through the thick canopy of leaves. Minho was the leader of an indigenous tribe. He had lived in the jungle his entire life. He knew every tree, every path, every hiding place. When the Vorthak soldiers entered his territory, he was ready for them. The aliens followed what they thought was a clear path through the forest. They did not know that Minho and his people had prepared traps along the way. Hidden pits covered with leaves made the heavy soldiers fall and get stuck. Tripwires connected to falling logs knocked them down. Poisoned darts shot from hidden positions made them sick and weak. The Vorthak had superior technology, but the humans had something more valuable: knowledge of their own world. Dr. So-Young worked frantically in a secret military bunker. She was a communications expert, and she had been studying the alien signals since the fleet arrived. She discovered that all Vorthak soldiers used the same radio frequency to talk to each other. This gave her an idea. So-Young built a powerful transmitter that could broadcast on the Vorthak frequency. When the alien soldiers tried to call for help or receive orders, they heard only static and confusion. She had jammed their communications. Without radio contact, the Vorthak forces became isolated and lost. They could not coordinate their attacks. They could not call for backup. They were fighting blind. Around the world, similar scenes played out. In London, humans used the old subway tunnels to launch surprise attacks. In Tokyo, they turned skyscrapers into sniper nests. In New York, they used the city's complex street layout to confuse and trap alien patrols. The humans were not stronger than the Vorthak. They were not more advanced, but they had something the aliens did not understand. They knew how to fight dirty. Captain Hyunwoo found himself trapped in Seoul with half his force dead or missing. This was supposed to be a simple occupation. Instead, it had become a nightmare. The humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. He managed to send a message to Admiral Taemin. "Sir, we are encountering unexpected resistance. The humans are not fighting like other species. They use tactics we have never seen before." Taemin was receiving similar reports from all over the planet. His invasion force, which should have conquered Earth in a single day, was being picked apart piece by piece. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. On the second day of the invasion, something even more surprising happened. Human governments around the world began working together. Countries that had been enemies for decades suddenly started sharing intelligence and resources. Former enemies became allies overnight. Russian pilots flew missions with American bombers. Chinese scientists shared research with European laboratories. African nations provided strategic metals to Asian manufacturers. The species that could not even unite their own planet was suddenly working as one. Dr. Ji Hai found herself at the center of a global network of scientists and engineers. They were working around the clock to analyze captured Vorthak technology. Every alien weapon they found was taken apart and studied. Every piece of armor was examined for weaknesses. Within 48 hours, human engineers had figured out how the Vorthak energy weapons worked. They could not build them yet, but they understood the principles. More importantly, they found ways to defend against them. Young-soo was the electronics engineer in Busan. He worked with a team of international experts to develop countermeasures against Vorthak weapons. They discovered that the alien energy beams could be deflected by certain types of metal, arranged in specific patterns. Soon, human forces were carrying shields that could stop Vorthak weapons. The technological advantage that the aliens had counted on was starting to disappear. The third day of the invasion brought an even bigger shock. Pilot Yun-soo was flying a captured Vorthak fighter that human engineers had repaired. She discovered that human reflexes were actually faster than Vorthak reflexes. The aliens were stronger, but humans were quicker. In space combat, speed mattered more than strength. Yun-soo outmaneuvered 3 Vorthak fighters and shot them down. It was the first time in Vorthak history that their pilots had been defeated in single combat. Admiral Taemin stared at the reports coming in from all fronts. His invasion was failing. The humans were not just resisting, they were learning. Every day they became more effective. Every battle taught them new ways to fight. He had conquered 846 worlds without ever losing a single battle. But this small blue planet was different. These humans were different. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Vorthak admiral considered the possibility of retreat. But retreat was not the Vorthak way. Strength through domination. The strong rule the weak. The problem was he was no longer sure who was stronger. 3 months had passed since the Vorthak invasion began. What was supposed to be a quick conquest had turned into a long and bloody war. But something amazing was happening on Earth. Humanity was changing. Countries that had fought each other for hundreds of years were now working together like old friends. The United Nations had become the United Earth Command. Every nation contributed what they could to the war effort. Money, weapons, soldiers, scientists, everything was shared freely. Engineer Woo Jin worked in a secret facility hidden deep in the mountains of South Korea. Around him, the brightest minds from every continent worked together. They had one goal: understand Vorthak technology and make it better. The humans had captured dozens of alien weapons and vehicles. Instead of just copying them, they improved them. Human creativity was something the Vorthak had never encountered before. Every captured device became the starting point for something new and better. Woo Jin held a modified Vorthak energy rifle in his hands. The original weapon could fire 20 shots before needing to recharge. The human version could fire 50 shots and was half the weight. They had taken alien technology and made it more efficient. "We do not just copy," Woo Jin explained to his international team. "We understand the principles, then we make them work better for humans." The Vorthak had built their weapons for their own biology. They were 8 feet tall with 4 arms and thick armor skin. Humans were smaller and weaker, but they were also faster and more flexible. Human engineers redesigned everything to match human strengths. Pilot Yoon-soo had become famous around the world. She was the first human to shoot down a Vorthak fighter in space combat. Now she led a squadron of human pilots flying captured and modified alien ships. The Vorthak had trained for space combat for thousands of years. Their pilots were skilled and experienced. But they had one weakness: they thought in straight lines. They attacked directly and expected their enemies to do the same. Human pilots thought differently. They had learned to fly by watching birds and insects. They used curves and spirals and sudden direction changes. Yoon-soo could make her fighter dance through space in ways that confused and frustrated Vorthak pilots. "The aliens are strong," she told her squadron before a mission. "But strength without flexibility is just a heavy weight. We are the wind and they are the mountain. The wind always finds a way around the mountain." Her pilots laughed and nodded. They understood. Human tactics were not about overpowering the enemy. They were about being smarter and more adaptable. Commander Kyung-soo had a different job. He was in charge of psychological warfare. The humans had learned to intercept Vorthak communications. They could listen to alien radio transmissions and understand what the enemy was saying. But Kyung-soo went further than just listening. He started talking back. Using captured communication equipment, he broadcast messages directly to Vorthak ships. But these were not threats or demands. They were questions. "Why do you fight?" he asked in the Vorthak language. "What do you gain from conquering us? Are you happy with your lives?" At first, the Vorthak soldiers were confused. No enemy had ever tried to talk to them before. Most species either surrendered or fought in silence. But the humans wanted to have conversations. Some Vorthak soldiers started responding. They began talking to human operators who had learned their language. These conversations revealed something shocking. Many Vorthak soldiers did not really understand why they were fighting. Dr. Young-sik was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life forms. He had been examining captured Vorthak soldiers and equipment. What he discovered changed everything. The Vorthak were not naturally aggressive. Their warrior culture was artificial. Every Vorthak child was given drugs and treatments that made them violent and obedient. Their entire civilization was built on forced conditioning. Young-sik shared his findings with the human leadership. "They are not born warriors," he explained. "They are made into warriors. Someone or something has been controlling them for thousands of years." This discovery spread quickly through the human resistance network. People began to see the Vorthak differently. They were not evil conquerors. They were victims of their own system. Meanwhile, Admiral Taemin was facing a crisis unlike anything in Vorthak history. His invasion had not just failed. It was turning into a disaster. Human forces were now launching attacks on Vorthak ships in orbit. They had gone from defense to offense in just 3 months. Taemin had sent dozens of reports to the Vorthak High Command, requesting reinforcements. Each request was denied. The High Command refused to believe that a primitive species could threaten the Empire's finest warriors. "You are exaggerating the threat," his superiors told him. "Use your existing forces more efficiently. Crush these humans quickly." But Taemin knew the truth. The humans were not just another conquered species. They were something new and dangerous. They learned faster than any species the Vorthak had ever encountered. They adapted to every situation, and most terrifying of all, they were teaching each other. Every battle taught humanity something new about Vorthak weaknesses. Every captured weapon became a blueprint for better human technology. Every intercepted communication revealed more about Vorthak culture and psychology. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were conducting a massive learning experiment with the entire Vorthak civilization as their laboratory. Captain Hyunwoo had been trapped in Seoul for weeks. His original force of 50 soldiers was down to 12. The humans had turned the entire city into a maze of traps and ambush points. Every street corner could hide enemies. Every building could contain snipers, but something else was happening to Hyunwoo. The human psychological warfare broadcasts were starting to affect him. He found himself thinking about things he had never considered before. Why was he fighting? What was the point of conquering Earth? Would adding another slave world really make the Vorthak Empire better? These thoughts were dangerous. Vorthak soldiers were not supposed to question their orders. But the humans kept asking questions, and Hyunwoo could not stop thinking about the answers. One night, while hiding in an abandoned building, he heard a human radio broadcast. A woman was speaking in perfect Vorthak language. "My name is Dr. Ji-hee," the voice said. "I am the scientist who first detected your fleet. I want to talk to any Vorthak soldier who is listening." Hyunwoo almost turned off his radio, but curiosity made him keep listening. "We know about the drugs," Dr. Ji-hee continued. "We know about the conditioning. We know that you were not born to be warriors. You were made into warriors against your will." Hyunwoo felt something crack inside his mind. How did the humans know about the conditioning? That was supposed to be a state secret. "We are not your enemies," the broadcast continued. "Your real enemy is the system that took away your choice. We want to help you remember who you really are." For the first time in his adult life, Captain Hyunwoo began to cry. He did not understand why, but something deep inside him was waking up. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Across the planet and in orbit above, other Vorthak soldiers were having similar experiences. The human psychological campaign was working. Cracks were appearing in the perfect unity of the Vorthak military machine. Admiral Taemin received reports of soldiers refusing orders, abandoning their posts, and even surrendering to human forces. This was impossible. Vorthak soldiers did not surrender. They fought until death, but these soldiers were not dying. They were choosing to live differently. The war was changing into something no one had expected. It was not just a battle between two species. It was a battle between two ways of thinking about life itself. The humans had discovered something that would shake the Vorthak Empire to its core. The truth about what the Vorthak had been before they became conquerors. And that truth was spreading like a virus through the alien forces, one soldier at a time. 6 months after the first Vorthak ships appeared in Earth's sky, the war had changed completely. The aliens who came to conquer were now fighting for survival. Humanity had not just stopped the invasion, they had turned the tables. Captain In-ho stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the first warship built entirely by humans. It looked different from both human and Vorthak designs. The engineers had taken the best ideas from both species and created something new. The ship was smaller than a Vorthak dreadnought, but much faster. It carried weapons that could punch through alien armor and shields that could deflect their energy beams. Most importantly, it was crewed by humans who had learned to think like hunters instead of prey. "Target acquired," reported Navigator Sumin from her station. "Vorthak supply convoy, 3 ships, no escort," In-ho smiled. The aliens had made a mistake. They thought they were still the dominant force in this war. They sent supply ships without protection, because they could not believe that humans would dare to attack them in space. "All stations, prepare for attack," In-ho ordered. "Remember, we want to capture those ships, not destroy them. We need their technology and their crews." This was the new human strategy. Instead of just fighting to survive, they were fighting to learn. Every captured ship taught them more about Vorthak civilization. Every prisoner gave them more information about alien weaknesses. The Defiance attacked like a shark, fast and deadly. The Vorthak supply ships tried to flee, but human engines were more efficient. They tried to fight, but human tactics were more clever. Within an hour, all 3 alien ships were captured. The human boarding teams moved through the ships carefully. They used non-lethal weapons that stunned the alien crews instead of killing them. The Vorthak soldiers expected to die in battle. Instead, they woke up as prisoners. Dr. Haywan was waiting when the captured ships arrived at the secret human base. She was a geneticist who had been working on the most important project of the war. For months she had been studying Vorthak biology, trying to understand how their conditioning worked. What she had discovered was both terrible and hopeful. The Vorthak had been genetically modified over thousands of years. Chemicals and drugs had changed their brains to make them aggressive and obedient. But these changes were not permanent. They could be reversed. Haywan had developed a treatment, part medicine, part virus, that could undo the genetic conditioning. When Vorthak soldiers were exposed to it, they began to remember who they had been before the military programming. The first test subject was Captain Hyunwoo. He had surrendered to human forces in Seoul after weeks of psychological broadcasts had broken through his conditioning. Now he sat in a medical chair while Dr. Haywan prepared the treatment. "This will not hurt," she assured him in his own language, "but it may be confusing. You are going to remember things that were hidden from you." Hyunwoo nodded. He was no longer the fierce warrior who had landed in Seoul 6 months ago. The human broadcast had awakened something in him. Doubt, curiosity, and a strange emotion he had learned was called compassion. The treatment worked slowly. Over several days, Hyunwoo began to change. His aggressive posture relaxed. His constant anger faded. For the first time in decades, he smiled without showing his teeth as a threat. "I remember," he whispered to Dr. Haywan. "I remember what we were like before. We were not warriors. We were artists and philosophers and scientists. We loved beauty and knowledge and peace." Dr. Haywan nodded sadly. "The treatment is working. You are becoming yourself again." But the real shock came when Hyunwoo volunteered to help spread the treatment to other Vorthak soldiers. This was unprecedented. No conquered enemy had ever switched sides so completely. Meanwhile, the Vorthak High Command finally realized they had a serious problem. Reports were coming in from across their empire. Human ships were attacking Vorthak outposts. Alien soldiers were deserting or surrendering. Some were even actively helping the humans. Admiral Seo-jun was the most feared commander in the Vorthak military. He had never lost a battle in 300 years of service. When the High Command ordered him to take the Grand Fleet to Earth, he was confident that he could crush the human rebellion quickly. The Grand Fleet was the pride of the Vorthak Empire. 500 massive warships carrying the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Each ship was the size of a human city. Together they represented the full military might of Vorthak civilization. "These humans have gotten lucky," Seo-jun told his officers as the fleet prepared to depart. "They defeated our advance forces through trickery and surprise. But they cannot stand against the full power of the Empire." The Grand Fleet took 2 months to reach Earth. When they arrived, they expected to find a broken world, defended by scattered human forces. Instead, they found something that shocked them to their core. Earth was no longer alone. Ships from a dozen different species orbited the planet. These were races that the Vorthak had conquered years ago, but who had been secretly building resistance movements. The humans had contacted them all and offered them freedom. Commander Sung-min had been working on this project for months. He was a diplomat who spoke 17 different alien languages. He had reached out to every enslaved species in the Vorthak Empire with the same message. "We have found a way to break the conditioning. We can free your people." The response had been overwhelming. Species that had been slaves for centuries sent ships and volunteers to help Earth. They brought their own knowledge and technology to the human war effort. But the humans had one more surprise for Admiral Seo-jun. As the Grand Fleet approached Earth, they began receiving broadcasts on all frequencies. The voice speaking was Captain Hyunwoo, but he sounded different. Calm and reasonable instead of angry and threatening. "Soldiers of the Grand Fleet," Hyunwoo said in perfect Vorthak. "My name is Hyunwoo. I was a captain in the invasion force. I want to tell you the truth about why we are here." Admiral Seo-jun tried to jam the transmission, but the humans had learned to use dozens of different frequencies at once. The message could not be stopped. "We are not here to conquer," Hyunwoo continued. "We are here because we were programmed to conquer. The conditioning that controls our minds is not natural. It was forced on us by our rulers to make us into weapons." Across the Grand Fleet, Vorthak soldiers listened in confusion and growing anger. Some tried to turn off their radios, but curiosity made them keep listening. "The humans have shown me the truth," Hyunwoo said. "They have a treatment that can break the conditioning. They can help us remember who we really were before we became soldiers. Dr. Haywan began broadcasting technical details about the treatment. She explained exactly how the genetic conditioning worked and how it could be reversed. She offered to share the treatment freely with any Vorthak who wanted it. The effect on the Grand Fleet was immediate and devastating. Some soldiers remained loyal to their programming and prepared to attack, but others began to question their orders. Some demanded to speak with their officers. A few even tried to surrender. Admiral Seo Jun watched his perfect fleet begin to crack apart. Discipline was breaking down. Ships were refusing to follow orders. Some crews were even fighting among themselves. This was supposed to be a simple military operation. The Grand Fleet would destroy Earth and execute all humans as an example to other rebellious species. But the humans had turned it into something else entirely. They had turned it into a liberation. Commander Sung Min broadcast a final message to the Grand Fleet. "We are not asking you to surrender to us. We are asking you to surrender to yourselves. Remember who you were before the Empire made you into weapons. Choose freedom." For the first time in Vorthak history, an entire military fleet faced a choice that their conditioning had never prepared them for. The choice between duty and freedom. And all across the Grand Fleet, soldiers began to choose. The Vorthak Empire died not with a battle, but with a choice. Across the Grand Fleet, thousands of soldiers made the same decision that Captain Hyunwoo had made months earlier. They chose to remember who they had been before the conditioning. Admiral Seo Jun watched his command fall apart ship by ship. The treatment that Dr. Haywan had developed was spreading like wildfire through his fleet. But it was not being forced on anyone. Vorthak soldiers were choosing to take it themselves. Entire ships stopped responding to orders. Some crews locked themselves in medical bays while they went through the liberation process. Others began broadcasting their own messages to ships that had not yet been treated. "I remember my name," said one soldier over the fleet communication system. "My real name, not my military designation. I remember that I used to write poetry before they made me into a killer." Another voice joined in. "I remember my family. We used to make music together. The Empire told us that music was weakness, but it was not weakness. It was joy." More and more voices added their memories, stories of art and science and love that had been buried under decades of military conditioning. The Grand Fleet was turning into something the galaxy had never seen before, a Vorthak liberation movement. Admiral Seo Jun tried to maintain control. He ordered his loyal ships to attack the ones that had been liberated. But even his most dedicated officers were beginning to question their orders. "Sir," said his second-in-command, a younger Vorthak named Tae-hyun, "why are we fighting our own people? If they want to be free, why should we stop them?" Seo Jun stared at Tae-hyun in shock. The question was so simple, but he had no answer. His conditioning told him that rebellion must be crushed, but his awakening mind was starting to ask why. Dr. Yuna had been preparing for this moment for months. She was the leader of the Galactic Rehabilitation Project, a human organization dedicated to helping liberated species rebuild their civilizations. As more Vorthak ships declared their independence from the Empire, Dr. Yuna began coordinating relief efforts. The newly liberated soldiers needed medical care, psychological support, and help adjusting to their freedom. "Freedom is not just the absence of control," she explained to her international team. "It is the presence of choice. These people need to learn how to make choices again." The humans worked with liberated Vorthak soldiers to establish refugee camps on Earth and other friendly worlds. Former enemies became teachers and students, learning from each other about different ways to live. Captain Hyunwoo became a bridge between the two species. He spoke to Vorthak soldiers who were afraid of the treatment, helping them understand what liberation meant. "I was terrified," he admitted to a group of hesitant soldiers. "The conditioning had been part of me for so long that I did not know who I would be without it. But I am still me. I am just a better version of myself." The liberation spread beyond the Grand Fleet. Word of the treatment reached Vorthak colonies across the galaxy. Slave worlds that had been controlled by Vorthak forces began to rebel, but these were not violent uprisings. They were peaceful revolutions led by liberated Vorthak soldiers who refused to fight their former slaves. On the Vorthak homeworld, the High Command watched their empire crumble in real time. Colonies were declaring independence. Military units were disbanding. The carefully controlled society that had existed for 3,000 years was falling apart. Some members of the High Command wanted to use nuclear weapons to destroy Earth and end the rebellion. But it was too late. The liberation had spread too far. Even on the homeworld, Vorthak citizens were demanding access to the treatment. Admiral Tae Min, the original invasion commander, faced a choice that no Vorthak leader had ever confronted. He could try to fight the inevitable collapse of the Empire, or he could join it. In the end, the choice was easy. Tae Min took the treatment himself. The liberation of Tae Min was broadcast across the galaxy. Here was the most famous Vorthak general, the conqueror of 100 worlds, publicly rejecting everything the Empire stood for. "I have spent my life serving a lie," Tae Min said in his liberation broadcast. "I thought I was bringing order to the galaxy, but I was only bringing slavery. The humans have shown me that there is a better way." With Tae Min's defection, the last resistance to the liberation movement collapsed. The Vorthak Empire officially surrendered, not to humanity, but to its own people. The surrender ceremony took place on Earth, in the same city where the invasion had begun. But this was not a traditional surrender. It was more like a liberation celebration. Captain Jae Hyun represented the United Earth Command at the ceremony. He had been chosen because he spoke fluent Vorthak and had worked closely with liberated soldiers throughout the war. "We did not come here to conquer you," Jae Hyun said to the assembled crowd of humans in Vorthak. "We came here to free you from the system that had enslaved you. Today we celebrate not the defeat of the Vorthak, but their liberation." The former Admiral Seo Jun stood beside him, no longer wearing military uniform but simple civilian clothes. He had volunteered to help establish the new Galactic Council, an organization dedicated to protecting the rights of all species. "The humans have taught us something that we had forgotten," Seo Jun said. "Strength is not about dominating others. True strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The ceremony marked the beginning of a new era in galactic history. The Galactic Council was established with representatives from every liberated world. Its first law was simple: no species would ever be enslaved again. Dr. Haewon became the head of the Galactic Medical Service, working to identify and treat other species that had been subjected to genetic conditioning. It turned out that the Vorthak were not the only race that had been artificially modified by their rulers. Engineer Wu Jin led the technology sharing initiative, which freely distributed advanced knowledge to any species that wanted it. The old system of keeping technological advantages secret was replaced with open cooperation. Commander Sung Min became the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council. His job was to help former enemies learn to work together as friends and allies. But perhaps the most important change was cultural. The Vorthak rediscovered their original civilization, which had been based on art, philosophy, and scientific inquiry. They built schools instead of barracks. They wrote poems instead of war songs. They explored space to learn, not to conquer. The former Captain Hyunwoo became a teacher on the liberated Vorthak homeworld. He taught young Vorthak children about their true history, before the military conditioning had changed their society. "We were not born to be warriors," he told his students. "We were born to be learners and creators and friends." The humans reminded us of this truth. One of his students raised her hand. "Teacher Hyunwoo, why did the humans help us when we tried to hurt them?" Hyunwoo smiled. It was a question that every liberated Vorthak asked eventually. Because they understood something that we had forgotten. When you help others become free, you become more free yourself. The student nodded thoughtfully. "So helping others is how we become strong?" "No," Hyunwoo corrected gently. "Helping others is how we become human." Years later, historians would debate exactly how humanity had achieved such a complete victory over a superior enemy. Some would point to superior tactics or better technology. Others would mention the psychological warfare or the genetic treatment. But those who had lived through the liberation knew the real secret. Humanity had won because they had refused to accept that winning meant dominating others. They had chosen to see enemies as potential friends and conquerors as prisoners who needed to be freed. In the end, the Vorthak Empire was indeed wiped from existence. But the Vorthak people survived and thrived, joining humanity in building a galaxy where the strongest protected the weakest instead of enslaving them. The memorial on Earth carried a simple inscription, written in both human and Vorthak languages. Here we learned that the greatest victory is not defeating your enemies, but helping them remember how to be free. And across the galaxy, former slaves looked up at the stars and knew that they would never be slaves again.